Okay, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending on where you're tuning in from. I'm Dr. Ruth Reisman, an audiologist and professor here in New York City, and we are back today with the Happy Hearing Podcast, episode 18. I'm here with my co-host, Carly Sygrove, and our special guests.
Hi everyone, welcome to episode 18 of the Happy Hearing Podcast. I'm Carly Sygrove, a hearing loss coach, advocate and writer. And today we are joined by our special guest, Dr. Edmund Farrar, who is the co-founder of Otto, which is a tinnitus therapy app, which it allows its users instant access to tinnitus therapy centered around cognitive behavioural therapy, which is also referred to as CBT. Welcome to the podcast, Ed.
Thank you both very much for having me. I'm looking forward to telling you guys a bit more about what we're doing and hopefully educating your listeners about a bit more about habituation.
Perfect, that sounds great. Do you want to start just by telling us about yourself?
Sure, yeah. So I'm a medical doctor by training. I graduated medical school, nearly 10 years ago now, 2015, and straight away joined the military. I spent 6 years in the Air Force as a doctor in the military, and the plan for me was always I wanted to train as a surgeon, specifically a plastic surgeon. But during my time in the military, two things happened. Number one, I saw quite a few patients with quite severe tinnitus. As you can imagine, it's pretty common in the military, a lot of noise exposure, very high risk. And I saw for these patients how difficult it was for them to get access to good quality help. And the second thing that happened was I actually, a few years later, developed tinnitus myself. And the combination of those two things, alongside me not really enjoying surgery as much as I thought I would, decided me to found Otto. That was about 4 years ago now, and here we are today.
Nice. So your area, I mean, in terms of the medicine that you were practicing in the military, was that just general medicine or ENT, or what was the area of expertise at that point?
Yeah, ironically, I've never done an ENT job. So in the UK, you do two kind of general, kind of like an apprenticeship years as a doctor, and then I spent a year doing just military stuff, doing my military training, and then after that year, that was when I went into surgical training. So I did 2 years of in the UK, you do general surgical training first before you go into specialist training. So I did 2 years of general surgical training, which was gearing me up towards starting to train as a plastic surgeon. And it was before I started doing that specialist training that I decided to leave medicine, leave the military because of this, this problem that I'd experienced both personally and professionally.
Okay, so Ed, you started the Otto app because of your own personal experience of tinnitus. So where are you at with that? Do you feel like you're already habituated, or do you want to tell us about it?
Yeah, sure. So I think I was very lucky actually with my tinnitus, relatively speaking. My tinnitus was never that severe. It started, I think, nearly 5 years ago now, and I was going through a very stressful period in my life. Work was very difficult. Wasn't getting much sleep, working long hours. Um, and the main impact it had on me was impacting my ability to get a good night's sleep. So I'd have a long day of work, get down to bed in the evening, put my head on the pillow, and all I could hear was this ringing sound, and all I could think about was this ringing sound, which I'm sure you guys can empathize with. And I felt stuck because I couldn't get a good night's sleep, and not being able to sleep would then mean that I was tired during the day, and that would increase my stress, and it would just be this vicious cycle. However, I was very lucky, and that when that stressful period passed, I found that my tinnitus improved as well. So I would say that yes, I was able to habituate, and for me, it was I was very lucky enough for it to be a relatively easy process because I think the tinnitus was just so closely linked to stress. However, for my co-founder George, he was a doctor in the Navy. He had a much more difficult, much harder time with his tinnitus. So he had tinnitus when we were at university, And it took him years to get to the point where it no longer had a big impact on his life. And it was that experience that he had that really helped us to give us a good perspective of what it's like for people that are really going for a hard time with tinnitus. And that period that I had gave me a kind of a taster, so to speak, of what it could be like.
So it sounds like you partnered together on your shared experience with tinnitus, and then did you feel like the methodology to habituate or to kind of manage the tinnitus was different, or was there something similar that led you to create Auto?
Yeah, so I think this would probably be a good point to explain the definition of habituation that we use for people with Otto, because I think one of the problems with habituation, especially for people with tinnitus, is that it's not a term that's very well understood. It's not a term that's actually used that as much as it should be by clinicians. So if you ask a GP here, in the UK, most won't be able to explain what habituation is, and that was crazy to us, because it's actually one of the best paths forward, probably one of the most powerful things that you can do for someone with tinnitus. It's the next best thing we have to a cure. So I think the thing that united George and I was this understanding that there was this very powerful technique or process that the brain could go through called habituation. And yes, it was very different for both George and I. Mine was very short. George's took years. But the thing that really shocked us was that habituation isn't something that's easy to do, and it's not easy to get access to the treatment to get towards habituation. So that's kind of what united both mine and George's experience, was that we've realized that it's just very difficult to get access to habituation. So how do we define habituation? Well, habituation is the point where three things happen with your tinnitus. Number one, your tinnitus sounds quieter. You perceive it to be not as loud as it was when it first started. Number two, you stop noticing it all the time. So when you're in the early stage of tinnitus, you think about it all the time. You hear it all the time. You notice it all the time. Can't stop thinking about it. And the third thing that happens when you've habituated is that if you do notice it, because the sound will still be there if you listen for it, but if you do notice it, it doesn't bother you. It doesn't give you those horrible emotions that it first did. And when those three things have happened, that's when you've habituated. And what those three things mean is that you can go back to the life you had before your tinnitus started. So your tinnitus no longer has an impact on your life the way it did when you were struggling with it. So yeah, most people with tinnitus probably would say habituation is just akin to ignoring it, but it's actually very different to ignoring it. And I think getting the definition, making the definition clear, putting it in a way that's easy to understand is really important.
Thanks, Ed. I think as well, for people with tinnitus, just hearing that definition in plain English and knowing that something like that is called habituation exists. If somebody's struggling with tinnitus and struggling to get that help and advice, that's invaluable, because knowing that you can actually live with it and for it not to bother you and to get to this point, it's so important, because like I hear from a lot of people, often with sudden hearing loss, because that's kind of the world I'm in, and often people who have got tinnitus because of that. And many of those people will say their tinnitus is more difficult to manage than their hearing loss itself. But when they've actually gone to get support for the tinnitus, maybe from a GP or an audiologist or something, generally, well, normally it's GPs that I hear people have gone to, especially in the UK. But generally they're told, oh, there's nothing you can do about it. You just need to learn to live with it, or just go and ignore it, or put a sound machine on and try and mask it, put it into the background. And actually, that's not good advice. Like, where is the hope in that? Where is the next step for that person? And where is that goal for that person? Because that person's goal shouldn't be trying to go home and ignore it. And it should be trying to reach that stage of habituation, which is, like you said, that stage where you kind of make peace with it in a way, don't you?
Yes.
And the whole way your body reacts, which is part of that tinnitus cycle. When it's calmer, then you're not perceiving it as loud. And I know that's where CBT comes in, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. And what you've just described, Carly, is one of the core problems we have with tinnitus. And as on behalf of the medical profession, it's not good enough how patients are communicated to with tinnitus. Hearing something like "you just need to learn to live with it" or "there's nothing you can be done" is just unacceptable. And there's actually a lot more awareness about this, just because there's a lot of prominent voices that are doing a very good job of getting this information out there. But when we first started with Otto, almost every person with tinnitus that I spoke to had been told something along those lines. We do a webinar with 50 people, and you'd say, "Look, raise your hand if you've been told that by your doctor," or something like that, and everyone would raise their hand. And the reason why it's so damaging is because if you think you've got this condition that's relatively new and it's ruining your life, it's literally ruining your life. You can't do anything. Your life is completely different to how it was before this thing started. And then you go to the doctor, who is, in your view, the last person that can help you. This doctor is your last hope. And you sit down with the doctor, and the doctor dismisses it and says, "Sorry, you just need to learn to live with it. Like, you can't do anything. There's no treatment." And that's why it's so damaging. That the trauma of hearing that in that moment it just must be horrendous for people. And I feel so sorry for the millions of people with tinnitus that have been in that situation. It's very damaging. And second, it's not true either, because there's actually so much you can do for tinnitus. The final thing I'll say on that is I don't necessarily blame the doctors. It comes from a place of just inexperience. When I was at medical school, we spent maybe 2-3 hours learning about tinnitus in a 5-year course. And that was learning about tinnitus as a symptom of something sinister that you needed to rule out. So, you'd learn about tinnitus. Tinnitus is a symptom of, I don't know, a brain tumor, ototoxic medication, something like that. You never learn about tinnitus as the very common condition that it is, in that it's something that often doesn't have a cause. And it's something that millions of people are struggling with, and you will see very frequently, especially if you go into general practice. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done in how healthcare professionals, and you're right, I think mostly it is GPs, but many ENTs as well, how these doctors are communicating to patients with tinnitus, because it has, even though it's like a sentence, a few words that you can say, it has such a big impact on the well-being and the eventual outcome of that patient's treatment.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And these are people who are already feeling vulnerable.
Yes, they're desperate.
Exactly.
They're desperate. So I said, the second thing I said about it was it's not true. There is lots you can do for tinnitus. There's loads of new treatments. There's loads of existing treatments, and there's some really exciting new treatments as well. Babe, should I maybe talk a bit about cognitive behavioral therapy, and I'll take on that?
Yeah, I was gonna ask about that, because I know there is so much there is so much available that people can tap into to support their tinnitus. I feel like it's almost difficult to navigate what is the best solution, and what is going to actually work, and what is real and what isn't real. And then there are some things that are affordable, and some things that are really, really expensive. And it's just like, what is the right choice, and how does a patient dealing with tinnitus navigate that?
Sure. It's a great question. And it's something that we need to do a good job of explaining to tinnitus patients. So if we think about it from the perspective of a clinician, when a clinician looks at treatments that you can give to a patient, you look at the amount of evidence that we have supporting that treatment, i.e., are there large-scale randomized control trials that assess whether this treatment is more effective than a control or a placebo. And the treatment that we know has the most evidence to suggest it's effective in tinnitus is something called cognitive behavioural therapy, or CBT. So CBT, go on to talk about the other treatments in a minute, but let me just explain how CBT works. CBT works by changing the brain's automatic reaction to the tinnitus. So guys, think back to, when you first heard your tinnitus. I imagine the emotion that you felt, the feeling that you had in your body was fear, anxiety, stress, frustration, desperation, isolation, all these horrible negative emotions. And that's you can't help that. That's an automatic reaction from your brain. So because your brain, the automatic reaction is that negative emotion, your brain sees your tinnitus as a threat. And because the threat is bad, it's an enemy, your brain needs to constantly check, is the tinnitus there? Is the tinnitus there? And, you'll probably remember, when you're struggling with tinnitus, your brain is just constantly on edge, like, check for your tinnitus, check for your tinnitus. It makes you remember them and think about the tinnitus all the time. So you end up not only hearing your tinnitus all the time, but thinking about it all the time as well, because of that stress response and that threat protection. It's an automatic response from your brain. So what we need to do is we need to change that brain's automatic reaction. And if we can reduce that reaction or get rid of that reaction and change the negative emotion so that there's no emotion, your brain no longer needs to keep making you aware of the sound of the tinnitus. And that results in you, those three things happening that I mentioned earlier. One, your brain stops checking to see if the tinnitus is there, so you stop noticing it. Two, if you do notice it, it doesn't make you feel bad, of course, because we've eliminated that emotional response. And three, because you're not stressed about your tinnitus, it sounds quieter. So tinnitus volume is mostly determined by subjective perception. And if you're not stressed and thinking about your tinnitus all the time, it's going to sound quieter. So, you can expect a very powerful outcome with cognitive behavioural therapy. And it's been shown to be the most effective treatment so far for tinnitus. It has the most evidence, and the evidence is the most convincing. Now, there are some other treatments that have shown promise. I'll kind of split those into established treatments and some new, more exciting treatments. So the established treatments that are quite popular, sound therapy or tinnitus retraining therapy, has some evidence to show that it can be beneficial. So that's instead of using like cognitive restructuring techniques to change your brain's reaction, it just uses sound to teach the theory is that it uses sound to teach your brain that the tinnitus isn't dangerous. And by listening to a sound at a certain volume over a period of time, your brain will learn that sound's not dangerous. The evidence for sound therapy or TRT is less convincing than for cognitive behavioural therapy, but there is still some evidence to show it can be helpful. And then there's some kind of tools and techniques that we know can be helpful, things that promote that habituation process, things like meditation and mindfulness, simple stuff like breathing. Breathing, we know, is a very powerful tool to modulate the body and the brain's response to tinnitus. Controlling your breathing changes the biochemical, there's a biochemical reaction that happens when you control your breathing. And that can help manage tinnitus as well. And then there's some newer treatments. One of the most exciting ones is called Linear. Linear uses something called bimodal neuromodulation, and it uses a combination of bimodal, so two modes, sound therapy So you listen to a sound through headphones, and then there's a device that stimulates your tongue. And they have some promising research that shows that over a 12-week period, if you use this device, I think it's twice a day for 30 minutes, you can reduce the tinnitus symptoms. And they're having a lot of success in the US at the moment, and a lot of clinicians in the US are having really great results with Linear. So exciting to see what research they do in the future. And then, of course, the big thing, especially for your audience, will be hearing aids and cochlear implants. So if you have an associated hearing loss with tinnitus, then we know that a hearing aid can be very effective. And that's, as such, a hearing aid is actually recommended as a treatment for tinnitus, especially in the UK by the National Institute for Healthcare Excellence, which is the recommending body for clinicians. Hearing aids will help a large number of patients with tinnitus. And for that same reason, cochlear implants will do as well.
It's really interesting, Ed, because I've just been fitted with my cochlear implant and it'll be activated in a few weeks. And although my tinnitus doesn't bother me anymore, I'm still excited to see when my processor's on, does that tinnitus reduce or go away? Because many people I've talked to have said, actually, when they're wearing their processor, the tinnitus is gone. And, you know, I'm fully habituated, but even then, even so, that is an exciting thought that it might actually just quash it.
Yeah, I can imagine. And look, there is a growing body of evidence that shows that cochlear implants are a very effective way for the right patient, a very effective way to manage tinnitus. And I can imagine you must be, even though you're habituated, it must be an exciting prospect to, have the idea of your tinnitus either be significantly reduced or disappear completely.
Exactly. I think you can still be habituated, but still love the idea of having silence one day. It kind of, for me, it's just two hands, hand in hand, they're going together, So yeah, we'll see, and I'll be excited to feed back what happens. But anyway, back to you. I think what I'm wondering is, so you created the Otto app, and I know you did this with CBT as the main tool. Do you want to tell us about how you integrated CBT into an app and how Otto works to help people with tinnitus?
Of course. CBT is typically delivered face-to-face with a clinician. So it could be a psychologist, it could be an audiologist, or it could be, there's some other clinicians that are trained to deliver CBT as well. We wanted to replicate that face-to-face experience as closely as possible. So we wanted it to feel like you were, in the room with a psychologist, or in the room with a clinician talking to you through these skills that you learn. And we thought the best way to do that would be to package CBT into a recorded audio program. So the way the app works, we really split it into two parts. The first part is an educational part, explaining to the patient what is habituation and how does it work, getting the patient excited about habituation. And we know that patients probably won't have heard of habituation before. If they have, it's not something they'll really be excited about. So, we want to get them motivated and bought into this. So that's the first part of the course. And then the second part of the course is the habituation part itself. And the way it works is each day you'll use, you'll go into the app and you'll do a 5 to 10 minute recorded audio session that teaches you a skill or a technique mostly related to CBT, but there's some other therapeutic techniques in there as well, some sound therapy, some mindfulness. We have some physical stretches and things. Some people find that stretches can help relieve tinnitus, neck stretches and jaw stretches. And then there's some specific content related to things that people with tinnitus might be struggling with. So if it's sleep, focus. Now, we know that a lot of our users do have hearing loss, of varying extent or varying severity. So the app is also for use with subtitles as well. So you can follow it either using the recorded audio sessions, or you can follow it using the subtitles on the app. And we wanted to make sure that you can choose which way you want to work through the program.
And this is something that patients can buy themselves?
Yeah, so it depends where you live. In the UK or the US, it's available in 2 languages, English and French. In the UK and the US, in the UK, you typically buy it yourself. In the US, you can buy it yourself, or you could go through one of our partner audiologists. We have just launched a partner program in the US for clinicians, and we're working with them to be able to help them provide CBT as part of their offering. But yeah, if you just go to the App Store and search Otto Tinnitus, or if you're living in France, Otto Acouphene, you'll be able to find it. It includes a 7-day free trial, so the first 7 days is free. You can try whether you like it, and then after that, there's a 3-month treatment program which costs about $140 for the 3 months. And we it's really important to us that this is something that's affordable, and we compared it to the cost of face-to-face CBT, which is what we're replacing. And you'll find that that's a 3-month treatment program is a fraction of the cost of what you pay with a therapist. So yeah, the aim of Otto is to make CBT accessible to anyone. You know, not many clinicians are trained to deliver CBT. It's very difficult to access. And with Otto, we want to change that. We want to allow anyone to be able to access CBT at the touch of a button directly from their smartphone.
Do you find that after 3 months, most patients have habituated, or do they have to go through another round of therapy, or is there like a different stage once they've completed that phase?
Yeah, so the habituation is not a linear process for most patients. It's very much an up and down. We've actually done a lot of research looking into this. We're currently running what we call the DEFINE trial, which is a randomized controlled trial comparing the Otto app to face-to-face CBT. And we don't have the results publicly available yet, but when we do, we'll be able to see what percentage of people and to what extent improved at 3 months, 6 months, and 9 months. We find that most people will improve a significant amount at the end of 3 months. And what I mean by significant is there'll be a noticeable improvement in their extent of habituation. So when you first go into the app, you can do a questionnaire, and that questionnaire will give you what we call a habituation stage. There's 4 stages. Stage 1 is really acute phases of tinnitus. Stage 4 is habituated. Most people will have moved by at least 1 stage in that 3-month period. So if you've got someone with really severe tinnitus, they're most likely have gone from either stage 1 to a stage 2 or 3. If you've got someone that's maybe a stage 2 or 3, they've either habituated or they've, they're not far off doing so. So it really depends on the patient. But we see that we see most patients getting a significant improvement in that 3-month period. After the 3 months, if they want to continue, they can renew the subscription and they can practice embedding what they've learned. Habituation is all about practice. It requires a lot of practice, and the more you practice, the more likely you are to have a convincing result. So we do recommend that people continue to practice using the skills and techniques they've learned during the program that we offer.
I think what I'm getting from this, what's really important as well, is if somebody does start with tinnitus and they go to their GP, they're told, nothing to do, you can't do anything about it. If they find that your app, or maybe a GP recommends your app, that would be amazing. It gives them that positivity, that hope, that next step. It's something they can do in their own time, by themselves, maybe while they're waiting to see a tinnitus therapist, or maybe while they're waiting to get some more treatment. But instead of in that time between, maybe the tinnitus is getting worse with the anxiety and that cycle you were talking about, they're actually working on it themselves. Or just use your tinnitus app and nothing else. It's just something they can do. And I think just knowing that you can do something about it, and knowing that there's something accessible like this can be really helpful, even just for that mindset of knowing I can move forward from this. You know, people are out there living happily. There are ways to do this, and here it is in a nice packaged program.
Yeah, indeed. And look, I think one of the, as I said before, one of the main aims we have with Otto is to give anyone instant access to good evidence-based support for tinnitus wherever they are in their journey. If they are getting treatment, you know, and they just need a bit of help, bit of psychological support, the Otto app will be there. If they are in the very early stages and they have just, you know, they've been to the doctor and they feel like that all hope is lost, and then they find the app and they hopefully we can, you know, show them that actually that's not the case. And actually, when I do speak to clinicians that manage tinnitus patients, and you know, whenever I talk to doctors, audiologists, you know, anyone that regularly encounters patients with tinnitus, I always tell them to just reframe the way they talk about tinnitus treatment. So, you know, when we used to work, I've spoken to a lot of people with tinnitus with Otto, and the first thing I would say to people when I'm speaking to them one-on-one, when I tell them about Otto, is there's something I'm really confident we could do to help you. There's a type of therapy that is proven to be effective. And if you use that kind of language very early on, you give people that hope and that belief that actually this is something that they can help. It makes a big difference further on down the line. It's just refreshing, I think, to be able to tell someone that you can help them when they've been told so many times in their journey thus far that there is nothing that can be done. And the other thing is as well, the first thing you do when you get bad tinnitus, or the first thing a lot of people do, is they start searching online, you know, what can you do for tinnitus? Tinnitus cures. And I think there's a lot of negativity online. You know, if you just go to the Reddit tinnitus forum, there's a lot of good content on there as well, but there is a lot of negativity about tinnitus. And you know, if you go on one of these forums and the first thing you see is like a person saying I'm feeling suicidal because of my tinnitus, that's not going to make you feel better. So yeah, I think like a positive message is something that I always encourage for people with tinnitus, because there is a lot to be positive about.
It's almost like if you could provide a really short script to healthcare professionals, starting with exactly what you said, Ed, starting with there's something that I feel really confident will help you, and then explain CBT or explain your app. It would make a world of difference to sending somebody out the door saying we can't help you, go and live with it.
Yeah, we actually have a script that we've tested and iterated upon multiple times. You know, we've spoken to over 1,000 people with tinnitus one-on-one Otto, and we just tested this script and iterated on it to see how we could get people bought into habituation and CBT as a whole. Because a lot of the time when you use the word therapy to someone with tinnitus, you just get an instant wall. God, I don't need therapy. I need something that's going to help me. Like therapy, I'm not, you know, therapy is not going to help me. My tinnitus is a physical thing. You know, it's not in my head. So if you frame it in a way that actually makes it seem like it's something far more powerful, which I think it is, than just like counseling. Yeah, I say just counseling, but counseling can be very powerful, but in their head at that moment, it's not what they need. So yeah, we have this script that we used and we tested multiple times, and you know, I think I can get most people with tinnitus bought into habituation. There will still be the maybe the 20-30% of people who I just don't think CBT would be helpful for, because there's a lot of people, understandably so, who are only interested in a cure and nothing else. And unless you use the words "I have a cure," they're just not going to be interested. But yeah, the language that you use with tinnitus patients can have a really big impact on the outcome.
Yeah, as a professor and a researcher, I guess I'm most curious about where is the research taking place? Is it with your military colleagues, or is it with the NIH, or where's the majority of the research happening?
So we did 2 trials with Flinders University in Australia. The current trial we're running, the DEFINE trial, is running with the University of Cambridge. You know, set out to hold ourselves to a really high standard with the quality of evidence we're generating. And we're very proud to be working with the University of Cambridge, who are one of the world's leading research institutions. And the trial was actually funded by the UK government as well, by an organisation called Innovate UK. It's a big trial, over 200 patients, which is a relatively big trial for tinnitus. And the aim is to show that the Otto app or the Otto program is as effective as face-to-face CBT. And if we can say that, we solve a very big problem, because not many people can get access to face-to-face CBT.
Exciting trials. It'd be interesting to see the results of this. When are you expecting the results?
So the trial finishes early next year, and we should be publishing the results probably between Q1 and Q2 next year, so March, April time.
Okay, I'll look out for that.
So I guess as we're nearing the end of our time here, I'm just curious if you can give us a highlight of what makes Otto unique. I know we spoke a lot, and I know there are some other kind of apps that claim to be doing maybe similar things. I'm just curious about what makes Otto unique, and then what is in store for the future of Otto.
At Otto, we understand tinnitus from a personal perspective, from a lived experience perspective, better than anyone else. The team is founded by two doctors that have tinnitus, and we have spent the last 4 years just obsessing over understanding the pains and difficulties that people with tinnitus have. And that is reflected if you look at the app. If you look and listen to the content in the app, it's really, really geared towards helping people with tinnitus in the shortest space of time as possible. The second thing I would say is that the research we're doing is really unrivaled by any other digital tinnitus program. So the DEFINE trial is the largest of its kind in tinnitus apps, and the results will be groundbreaking when we get them. Fingers crossed. But when we have a trial like that, we aim for it to change the industry completely, because it will mean that patients no longer need to have to wait 6 months, a year, maybe even never, to get access to one of the best treatments for tinnitus. They can have it at their fingertips, and that trial, puts the power of CBT in everyone's hands, and that research is something that only we have. And I think you asked about next. Did you ask about next steps as well?
The future of Otto.
Of course, yeah, future of Otto. So we've, as I said, we've spent the last 4 years trying to get Otto into patients' hands directly. We're now focusing on helping clinicians manage tinnitus. So we recently translated the app to French, and we've launched as a medical device in France as a digital therapy program. The aim is to get the app eventually into patients' hands free at the point of use. So this is a longer term game, but we don't just want people with tinnitus to have to pay for something like this. We want people with tinnitus to be able to access this paid for by their health insurance, or by their healthcare provider. We want it to be free at the point of use, and that's a longer term game. It will take a few years, but watch this space. We have some exciting developments over the next 6 to 12 months.
Yeah, that's great to hear. I mean, all of it sounds so encouraging, and I do manage patients with tinnitus on a consistent basis as well. So I'm looking forward to recommending it and offering it as a solution as well.
Thank you. Well, if we can help with that, let me know, because we do have a final thing I'd say. We do have a dashboard actually. We have a solution for clinicians, which is a dashboard where you can prescribe the app very easily and then check on patient usage. So if we have any clinicians listening, and they'd like to try that out. We have a short waiting list at the moment, but please do get in touch if you'd like to hear more.
Fantastic. I'll continue to recommend the app as well, Ed, because I used it a few years ago, and just the free version, because just to give it a try, and I thought it was excellent. So we'll continue recommending you, and looking forward to hearing the results of the research, and yeah, be watching the progress.
Thank you both very much for having me. It's been a great conversation. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was great meeting you, and thank you for all the information. And hopefully we'll have you back when the results come out. I'd be curious to hear all the findings and the research.
I'd love that. Thank you, guys.
Okay,
Thanks,
great.
Ed.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Bye.
Thank you.